Hi there, welcome to HoboRec Bold Sessions. Today we're going to talk about recording and mixing heavy bass tones. Yeah, so a while back I got a question about if I can talk a little bit about recording and mixing heavy bass tones, and of course I can do that. I don't have a really specific go-to technique to do that, but one thing I usually do is to split up the signal in some way in a lower frequency and in the higher mid frequency. This means you can treat them a little differently in a mix. You can put more compression on the low end to keep the low end really tight, not like messing it up too much, and you can keep the higher mids more dynamic and punchy. I'm of course talking about recording bass with kind of a lot of distortion, but one way that I think is pretty common, and I use that technique a lot, is split up the signal from the bass. Let one signal go into the bass amp with the distortion, and you like put the tone you want on that. And the other signal goes through a DI box with no distortion or anything, just clean into your interface. If you don't want to do that, if you don't like to line the bass, you can also split up the signal in the bass amp and a guitar amp. So you split the signal and let the bass amp take care of the lower frequencies, put either no distortion on it or some distortion that sounds good on the lower frequencies. And then you take the one through the guitar amp, make it more aggressive and punchy in the upper mids, and record that on two different tracks. And then you can treat them differently, just as you did with the lined and mic'd version. In this case, I would also use different kind of microphones on the lower frequencies. For the bass amp then, I would use probably a kick drum microphone, sub-kick microphone, or a condenser microphone that takes a lot of bottom end. My favorite is the Neumann FET 47. I have my DIY built clone of that I use all the time, both on kick and on bass amps. And a technique with using different microphones, you can also do that if you just have one bass amp and you dial in the sound you want, and then you can put different microphones in different positions on the speaker cones to get the different tones that you can again treat differently in the mix. I have done some really advanced bass recording once. I think it was with 6 microphones that took care of different frequencies. I didn't actually plan to use all those microphones, but as soon as I took one of the tracks away, the whole bass sound fell apart, so I kept it all. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples, of course. The first example is from a recording I did now the last couple of days with a band called Sage from Halmstad in Sweden. Here we use the technique with splitting up in one bass amp and one guitar amp and let them take care of the different frequencies. And here's what it sounds like. Another example I have is with using just one amp but 2 different kind of microphones, and I have a common kick drum microphone, Shure Beta 52, like just outside the speaker cone where I thought it picked up the best low end, and then we have a Sennheiser 421 more towards the middle of the speaker cone. And then of course you can put some different EQs and stuff on it in your DAW and treat them differently, like putting more compression on the low end and stuff like that. Yeah, and the third and last example is from a band called We Dream Alone from Gothenburg. And here I think we use the technique with one amp with probably 2 microphones on it and one line signal for just a low and clean. And I'm going to show you here what it sounds like. In the mixing phase, these techniques are pretty good because you can treat them differently if you have 2 or 3 different tracks. Usually I try to stick with just 2 tracks, one that takes care of the low end and one of the more upper mids. And usually I put more compression and low pass on the stuff that's going to take care of the lows, and high pass and not as much compression, and maybe some EQ to bring out the definition of the playing. What kind of distortion pedals and amps you're supposed to use, I can't answer that. It's just so much up to what kind of sound you're after and like your own preferences. As long as you have some quality gear, you're gonna get it to sound great. And of course, make sure the bass guitar is in tune. So thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments, and next week I'm gonna try to make my first Q&A session. So if you have any questions you want to have answered, please leave them here below in the comment section and I'm gonna have a look at it. So see you next week. Bye bye. Cheers.